Welcome to this session on next level Spring Boot tooling. It's going to be a 60-minute session. And I'm Andy Clement, and this is Kris and Martin, and together we work on the STS team in Vancouver and Germany. Just the usual statement. Most of the stuff we're going to show you is in the current release, but we might show you some stuff, preview stuff, and when we eventually ship it, it may not look like you see it today. So just a warning on that. You probably know what STS is, but just in case you don't, STS is we take the Eclipse distribution put out by Eclipse a few times a year. We add in some extra plugins that make it very easy to work with Spring and Cloud Foundry, as you'll see a bit later on today. And we wrap that up in something called the Spring Tool Suite distribution. If you go to that URL, you can grab the latest version. We put out a 3.8.1 release yesterday that you can grab. That's based on the Eclipse Neon release that came out in the summertime. So whenever there's an Eclipse release or service refresh, we follow it in a matter of days with an STS package with everything in. What are the plugins that you do? In the old days, they let you do the XML stuff for Spring. But as we've gone on, we've kept up with the times, annotation-related stuff, and now we get into the Spring Boot stuff, microservices story, and you'll see Martin's going to show you some cool demos with that in a little while. Let's talk about Spring Boot. Yes, our focus at the moment is to make it very easy to write Spring Boot, to write Spring Boot apps the right way, and work with them, especially in a microservices setup where you've got a number of them you're working on at the same time. Now, Kris and Martin are going to show you some pretty comprehensive workflows that you can go through with that stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff that doesn't quite fit into that, but it'll give you an idea of the kinds of things we're working on at the moment. I would encourage you, if you get time or if you haven't read them already, go and have a look at the new and noteworthies for the releases. You may see an Eclipse release come out and assume, well, that looks like the last release of Eclipse. If you actually go on the new and noteworthy, you'll see all the new cool stuff that's in there. So if you look at what they've changed for the Java tools, there's things like this substring code completion. So you can just type in partial pieces of a name, and when you ask for content assist, you get all the words with that in, rather than just the ones that start with it. There was some of that in the previous release given to you by code recommenders, but now it's a first-class feature in JDT. They've added some new stuff around templates. You'll see that we're also doing some stuff around templates that I'll get on to. More refactoring stuff to enable you to do things faster, like when you create a method with a number of parameters, you can immediately, with a quick fix, just create fields for all those parameters. You don't have to do them one at a time like you used to have. Things like search, you used to be able to search on one thing at a time. You now can select multiple things, press that search, and it will show you the results of finding all those things. But it's not just things in the JDT section. If you look in the platform section, there's stuff that can help you when you're writing Java. Some people get excited about this feature. I am not one of those people. But you now have word wrap in your text editors for people who need that kind of thing. Let me just show you that. There's a key binding, but there's also this button up here. So if you're limited on space, rather than losing it, you can actually see what's on that next line.
Question?
Oh, yeah. Is what? Sorry, I can't quite hear you. Merge conflicts. I haven't seen any enhancements to make that easier. I usually rely on Git to do the right thing. Are you aware of any changes to make? So the question was whether any enhancements to merge conflicts, but I'm not aware of any. But have a read through here. It might be tucked away somewhere. There's a lot of stuff in here. So yeah, and alongside that, of course, when we do a release, we also produce a new noteworthy. Now, STS doesn't have comprehensive docs somewhere. What we have is a new noteworthy where we really go into detail on how to use some of these features. So you'll see there's pages and pages of stuff. I'm not going to go through all this because you're going to see real-life demos from Kris and Martin. There's just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. So I showed you that JDT itself is adding some templates. We are also starting to do more work around templates to enable you to write. This is about what I talked about originally, about writing good Spring Boot code. So if you follow the templates, use the templates, you'll end up following the patterns of how people recommend you should write Spring Boot. Coupled with that, let's jump into STS. Just got this little demo application. Something that's always annoyed me is that the content assist for static imports just didn't work out of the box, and I felt like it should. So now if you're in a test and you start, this is a Spring Boot app I created with a starter wizard. If you start doing things like assert true and content assist on that, you get the content assist. This is a miracle. That works out of the box, and that's because we're doing some work for you managing the content assist favorites. I mean, maybe you didn't know that in order to get content assist in Eclipse for static imports, you need to add them to this list for it to work. So what we've done is we've added them all for you based on what we recommend you use for Spring Boot. I would encourage you, if you find some others that you use all the time, and maybe other people use all the time, let us know. We can maybe add them in. So now you'll find these just work out of the box. So it's all about making it easier and faster to write Spring Boot code. Another convenience feature, if you do a refactoring rename, so I've got an application here, and alongside I've got some tests for that application. If I rename the application, let's call it foo application, I get a warning because it's got a main method in, that's fine. But you'll see now you get a pop-up saying, you rename that, do you also want to rename your tests? That will save you some time. So if I click yes, you see my tests have also renamed. We're doing a lot of these little convenience features so you can work faster. A couple of pet ones that I want to cover. This is where, and you probably hit it too, you're working in Eclipse and you press Control Space and you can't understand why it isn't telling you the right thing. As an example, here we have, here I've got, in this other folder, I've got an interface, pretty straightforward, and I've got an implementation of that. This is just a plain Eclipse. I'm going to create an instance, and I'm going to press Control Space here. Where's my implementation? It's right there. It's like 4 lines away in the Package Explorer. Why can't the Content Assist see it? Those kinds of frustrations slow you down. So what we're doing in STS is that we're fixing some of these things. So if I go and do the same thing in my foo application, I get my implementation suggestion. So I would encourage you, again, if you get frustrated with Eclipse, just before you throw the computer out the window, use it to raise a JIRA against us, and we can maybe fix that for you. Let us know. Another case that drives me particularly crazy, I've got here a list factory, so I'm going to use my factory class. It's got a method on it, give me a list. Now, I haven't, at this time, got list imported. Let me jump over to this method. It seems pretty clear to me what that returns. Example foo list. But if I go and try and, in my application, do quick fix, Java AWT list, clearly that is not what I want. And somewhere down here, a few pages away, is my one that I want. Now, I would have thought it was pretty obvious which one I wanted. So what we're doing is fixing that in STS. So if I do the same thing here, my list factory, don't give me a list. Quick fix, it's the first one on the list. And I like this workflow of quick fix, press return to accept the first one. Bam, 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 bam. You just keep on working. So those are the kinds of quality of life improvements we're putting in so you can be more productive. So if you've got any of those, any frustrations, let us know. So those are a couple of things that didn't quite fit into the workflows the other guys are going to do. But I'm going to hand it back to Kris now. And he is going to, is it in there? take us through a full workflow of using some other features that I haven't touched on that are in that new and noteworthy. I encourage you to go and read it. Kris.
Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you how to work with Spring Boot applications locally and how to work with microservices in particular. So the idea here is that if you're working with microservices, you probably have more than one, right? So the point of having microservices is probably you have lots of them. And what the tools are trying to do here is give you a way to work with the subset of the applications in your workspace so that you can focus on the ones that you're interested in. So the thing that you see here is the Spring Boot dashboard. It's something we showed you last year as well. And I'm not going to show you as much of it this time, but I'm just going to quickly show you a few things. So the application that I'm working with is a chat application. I'm going to show you a demo with that and work with that. And I just type at the top here, chatter, and it matches on the name of the application or a tag that you attach to it. And that way I can very flexibly sort of work with a subset. And of course, if you have lots of applications, you probably want to run lots of applications. If you want to do that in Eclipse, it can be a little bit tedious. But if you do that with a Spring Boot dashboard, you just click on this button, and that's it. All your applications are starting. So let's have a quick look at what we're running here. You can also see the console is going here. And of course, I have lots of applications. I probably have a few consoles with the output. And there's something weird going on. Okay, let's ignore that. I hope that's not going to cause me any problems, but we'll see. Yeah, so you can see the consoles here. If you click on this button here, you can switch quickly between the different consoles. And let's stick with the chatter log for now. Or let's chatter log. It's one of the interesting ones. This particular one here, chatter web UI, is my user interface. And you see that next to each one, you see this number. That's the port that it's running on. So these ports are randomly chosen by Spring Boot. So it's particularly useful that you see them. You don't have to scan your console output to find where it is. You just double click on this and it will open in the web browser. So this is my application here. Now, most of this is not new, but what's new, one of the things that's new that I want to highlight here is we now support running multiple instances of the same thing, which might be useful if you're testing something with scaling or something locally. So for example, let's say I want to run another instance of this web UI. What do? Well, right click and then duplicate my launch configuration. And now you see that this expands here and I have two launch configurations for the same thing. I can edit it and change it a little bit. So I open my launch configuration. And notice we have some nice content assist there. I use server.port and run this on a different port because I cannot run the two instances on the same port. That wouldn't work, right? So change the port, and save this, and I can now launch this. And now you can see also, if I collapse this, you can still see the information summarized here. There's two things running, 2 out of 2. On 2 different ports. And I can also double click it. And you see now I have two versions of my application running. One on port 8081, one on port 8080. And of course they're connected because it's a CHAP application. How they're connected, I might get into this a little bit later. But behind the scenes here, this uses RabbitMQ and Spring Cloud Streams. So all my little web services here are talking to each other over RabbitMQ. Right? So that's how these two web UI instances are actually connected, even though they're separate processes. Okay, so that's about all I wanted to show you for now about the Boot dashboard itself. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to build a new microservice from scratch and add it to this application. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little chatter bot, something that sends messages every so often, just sending ping messages. So that should be pretty simple. So how we do that? Let's start by creating a new application. here's new Spring Starter project, and give it a name. It's already filled in, because I did this demo a few times, so it's remembered what I wanted to do. Pick a boot version, and then pick some starters. So I'm not going to dwell too much on this, because you've probably seen this kind of thing before. This is like the initializer app that you might have seen on the web. We have a front end for that, basically. So I pick my starters, web and actuator, and the rabbit one is the Spring Cloud Streams. That's how my microservices are all connected. So that's what I want. So finish. And you see that there is a new app that appeared here, and it appeared over there as well. I can sort of open in Package Explorer, and I can start coding right away. Okay. So here's my application. We're going to use Spring Cloud Streams. So to enable that, you use an annotation, enable binding, and it has a parameter. This parameter is a interface which basically defines the communication protocol that your app has with the rest of the code through the Spring Cloud Streams. And I'm going to use source.class, because what I'm implementing is just a stupid little bot which sends messages. So it is a source. It just sends things. It doesn't receive anything. Once you've done that, you get from Spring Boot and from Spring Cloud Streams, you automatically get a source, an instance of that class, a bean. And we'll auto-wire that. We'll use a very old quick fix that we had for a long time, just auto-wired. Okay, good. I want to start this bot once the app is kind of getting started, so I'll use a post-construct method to start my little bot. And I'll need something to execute something every so often, so I'll use a task scheduler. I'll call it scheduler. And I'm going to auto-wire that one too. It won't work just yet, because you get this for free, but you just have to ask nicely. Spring Boot will configure this for you, but you just have to ask nicely, basically. So say enable scheduling, and the scheduler will be created and can be injected. This source class, this is something in Spring Cloud Stream, so I can show you what's in there. Actually, I think it's actually good that you asked me, because I imported the wrong source class, actually. Let's fix that. I would have a surprise later on that something didn't work. So let's do, I need this source class, the one from Spring Cloud Stream. So what that is, when you do enable binding, what Spring Cloud Stream does, it creates some infrastructure for you to wire things up to the back end, which could be RabbitMQ or Kafka or something for messaging. And this defines how you talk to it, what kind of messages you receive and what kind of messages you send. So a source is a communication pattern where you're just sending things. So there is an output on that, because you're going to send something. You see? So, and the rest is all magic. Spring Cloud Stream sets that up. It creates queues and exchanges on RabbitMQ for you. And that's all set up. Yeah. And for receiving or transforming, there are other interfaces, and you can define your own as well. So you can define something completely custom or use one of those predefined ones. I'm just using this because the very common pattern is that you either just a consumer or a sender or something that receives messages and then does something and sends it back out, right? So for those three cases, you have something. If you have something more complicated, you can write it yourself. Where was I? Yes, here. So we create this, then we have the scheduler, we can start using it. And I can say schedule at fixed rate. I have two parameters here. So this one is how many time in between, 3,000 milliseconds, let's say. And here I need a runnable which we can use a nice lambda expression, because we're now all on Java 8, right? So we'll use a nice lambda expression. And now you'll see what that source is, because I've got that bean injected. So I can just use that now. It's a channel dot output, and then I can send a message on it. What kind of a message? We'll create the message using the message builder, which is also part of that Spring Cloud Stream libraries with payload. And the payload is what I'm going to be sending. So what am I going to be sending? Just a little ping message. Oh, ping. And to make it more interesting, I'll put a counter in it. Create field. Okay. And it's a message builder, so we have to build the message. Let's do it like this. Okay, that's all there is to it, and it should now be working. So if I'm running it now, it should work. Actually, it's not going to work, but we'll debug it a little bit later. So let's see. I run it. Let's run it. Uh-oh. Yeah, I've had this problem once before when I did my demo, and I don't know how to solve it. So Eclipse Maven has done something really bad to my project, and I don't know how to solve it. I'll try something which I've never tried before. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to cheat. Okay, sorry. I just copied this. Delete. Closed projects. Here. Okay, let's see if it works this time. All right. Sorry for the disruption. There's a bug somewhere that we have to figure out. But so my app is running, but as you can, oh yeah, sorry. I skipped the whole part of my workflow here. Let's delete this. All right. Stop. Okay. So when we run this, you see that it didn't get started. There was a problem with it. Now, this problem was actually expected. So I'm not running it on the right port. So what I have to do is I have to configure the port. So you saw that I did that earlier in the launch configuration. You can also do that in your application.properties file. We give you an editor for either the YAML or the properties format. You can use either one, which you like best. I'm going to use the YAML editor, and we get nice content assist in there. So if I do server.port, and I do this, and then I can just fill in the number. When I put 0, that basically means to Spring Boot, I'll pick that dynamically. Okay? Another thing which I did, which I kind of skipped because of all the mess, is I've added Spring Boot DevTools to this. So there's a few ways you could do that. The easiest way would be go right in this menu here, Spring Tools, and there is a menu there to add boot DevTools. And right now it says remove because I've already added it, but you could have added that way. What boot DevTools does, you'll see shortly. I'll just show you when it actually does something. So let's run this app again. I'll start it up. Okay. And you see that nothing is actually happening in my user interface here. I was expecting some messages. I don't see them. So let's try to figure out what is wrong with it. So let's go to, yeah, this is another thing that shouldn't be there yet, so I'll delete that too. Sorry. So here is my chatter ping bot. So if we want to figure out what's going wrong, maybe some debug messages would help. So let's add some debug messages. We'll need a logger. And like Andy said, we've added some templates. And one of those templates is a pattern for the typical Self4j logger. So you just expand the template here, and you get what the Spring Boot developers would recommend you write to create a logger. So that's this pattern here. And then I can also use it. We have some templates for using it as well. So debug log message, you would do like this. And I can say starting ping bot. And then we can do here another message saying sending message. Okay. And did you see that there was some activity here in the console? So that's what Spring Boot DevTools was doing. So it's like a tool that helps you more easily and quickly develop. Whenever you see whenever it sees a change in your project, it will automatically restart it in the background. Your app will be quickly restarted. So that's what happened here. I still don't see any debug messages though. Well, the reason for that is that I need to enable debug messages, because the logging level is something you configure, and by default the debug level messages are not output. So let's configure that. Logging.level, another property that we can get from Spring Boot, and we get some content assist there as well. The name of the logger is usually a class or a package, so we get content assist. It also knows what kind of things you can put there. So let's put debug. And now if I save this, see the activity happening here. And you see that my debug messages are coming out. So my debugging messages are now configured. That's just, well, the idea is with the debugger, this is Self4j logger, right? So it's a logging facility. When you ship your code, you probably don't want all those debug messages on. But when you're debugging, you want them. So the logger allows you to turn on selectively on or off your logging messages. So like when your app is deployed and there is something going wrong, with some properties that you can change, you can just turn on logging for a specific class and see what's going on in there. Right now it's in the class path. But there are different ways so that's actually a Spring Boot thing. So in Spring Boot, it gets these properties from many different places. So one place it can get it from is from these files in your class path. Another place it can get it from is from environment variables. Another place is system properties. So there are many places you can basically change these things. So you can have some stuff packaged into your app, but you can still override them from the outside through an environment variable or something like that. Yeah? Yeah, so, but we're seeing that these debug messages show us that it's actually working. They're being sent, but they are not arriving here. So something is still not there. Okay, so let's fix that. The problem is we have to configure where the messages are going. They have to go to the right channel in the RabbitMQ backend, basically. So if you look again at the source class, if I go back there and look at this source class, there is a identifier here, output, and this is the name of that channel, the name of that thing. And I need to bind that to a specific thing, a specific queue in RabbitMQ. So let's do that. Again, we can do that through these configuration properties, these bindings. So this is a binding. So I type binding, you see that my content assist suggests these things here. This is the one I want. Spring Cloud Stream bindings. So let's get that. And if I kind of click here, you can see what that is too. We can jump to the code. And you see that's a map of string and then a bunch of properties. And this string is the name of that channel, so output, right? Now I don't get the nice content assist for that because that's just a string. So I have to type that here. I type output. And then once I'm there, I get the content assist for these properties that are inside there. And what I want to do is set the destination to chat, because the name chat is what I used for all my communication with my application. Okay? So we set the destination of that to chat. I save it. And now you see that the ping bot is working. It's sending the messages. You see them appear. Sorry? That's just a name. Yeah, that's the same name I used in all the other ones. So in RabbitMQ, there are some exchanges and queues created, and that's the name of that thing. It's a resource basically somewhere in RabbitMQ, where I can send messages and receive messages from, right? So, and with Spring Cloud Stream, I defined, you have this pattern here. You have to map these outputs and inputs to specific things on the message bus, essentially. Okay, so you see it's all working now. My ping bot is sending messages and they appear in the UI, so it's all working. The next thing I want to show you is, you saw all this nice content assist here. What? You mean like this port? See, it says unknown property server port. So there is a warning here. Yeah. If I type yes, if I type instead of a number, I type ABC. You see, it says I expect an integer here. That's not good. So there is some checking, yes. Okay. Now, what I want to show you next is these properties are baked in sort of to Spring Boot, and we get nice content assist for that. But you can also get that for your own configuration, and that's what I want to show you next. How do you set it up so that you get the same nice content assist for your own configuration properties? So what we're going to do next is I'm going to fix something in this bot here. It's got some hard-coded stuff in it that we don't like. So let's make that configurable. So what I want to do is make a property called name for the name of the user of this bot, so that it can say here the name of the user instead of just ping, and that it can use the interval, that we can configure that. So how do we do that? We'll just create a new class for these properties. We'll call that class ping properties. And then we add an annotation called add configuration properties. You put a prefix there. So the name of my app is chatter, and the properties are all about this ping thing. So I'll call them chatter.ping. All my properties will start with this, chatter.ping dot something. And I will make a user property, and I will make a property for the time between pings. And another good thing to do is get default values. So the default values are so that if I don't configure them, things still work and have sensible defaults, right? So if I don't configure anything, my app will still work. So let's put that. Another good thing to do is put some comments. The comments are documentation, and they will show up also in the UI, in the editor. So it's good to put something useful here. So let's say the name used in the message. And this one is the time between messages in milliseconds, okay? And you see a few squigglies. Actually, there is one squiggly that is missing. Well, I'll just skip over that. So I'll just create some getters and setters for this. That's just a standard Eclipse quick fix. And there is one thing that I didn't, yeah, so I'm just going to skip over that actually. So, yeah, I've got the getters and the setters, and now everything should be working. There is some metadata that's generated by a Spring Boot annotation processor. Normally, I'd have to add them, but because of the little kerfuffle in the beginning there, it's already added now. So I'll just skip over explaining that for now. But, and we automatically get content assist here. So if I type ping, I'll get content assist for these properties. As you can see, chatter ping, I can say chatter ping time. And also here, like you asked earlier, if I type ABC, it's wrong because it's not a number and it's declared as long, so it automatically knows that it should be a number. So we'll put some shorter time here, so we'll see something interesting. User, and I'll call this user foo, okay? Now you'll notice it's reloading, but you don't see any real effect on the UI. Of course, that's to be expected because just defining properties doesn't make them be used, right? So we also actually have to use them. And how do you use them? Well, enable configuration properties, and then we need to put this class in here, ping properties class, okay? And then you can auto-wire that, just like any other bean. So we auto-wire that bean, and we can use it. What was the question? Yeah. There are different ways to activate that. So another way to do it is just to make sure, you have to make sure that Spring Boot knows that it has to create a bean for that. So another way that you can do it is just to annotate that class with @component. And that would also work. But if you annotate it with @component, that means that anybody who puts that class on their class path will automatically get it, right? It's a little bit, it depends on what you want. So you have some flexibility there. What was I doing? Oh yeah, ping dot get user. Okay. And now it's reloading, see? It works, okay? Do I have time for my last thing, or do we want to switch?
What's the last thing?
Just the deprecated.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is, yeah. No, this is not hot swap. This is Spring Boot DevTools. It's more of a class loader trick. So it basically reloads your classes, all of them, almost all of them. Not exactly all of them, but for practical speaking, let's say it reloads all your classes and restarts your app. So it's not Java hot swap. It's a feature from Spring Boot, provided by Spring Boot. Cheap version of JRebel, basically. Yes, essentially, yes. It restarts. It's like you would have just killed the app and restarted it, almost. Except it's a little bit more efficient because it reuses the JVM and a big portion of your classes that probably never changed, like the whole Spring framework and things like that. Yeah, the dev tools are a part in your project. They're in the POM, actually. It's just a dependency. That's all it is. No. No, you can use it on a command line, too. It's really a feature of the application built into it now, because it's part of your, it's on the class path of the project, and it's the project itself doing this. This is actually not our tools, in a way. We just added some features to the UI to make it easy for you to use, but you can use it on the command line just as well. But I think I have to move on, because otherwise we're going to run out of time before. So let me just do one more last little thing, which is I want to show you a quick fix with deprecated properties. So I'm going to show you what you would do if you want to make a property deprecated. So let's say I choose a wrong name here. I didn't want to call this time, but I want to call this interval. And I don't want to break the existing code, so I'm going to deprecate the old property and add a new one. So the best way to do that is just rename this. And the trick is only rename the fields, but don't rename the getters and the setter. So just keep those. And that will keep things backwards compatible, because you can still use the old getters and setters. And now we add some new getters and setters. OK. There. So now I have equivalent getters and setters, just different names, a single property. And we mark the old property as deprecated. And the way that works is the one that you have to mark is the getter. That's how Spring Boot deals with that. You could mark the other ones too if you want, but you don't. That's not important. The one that matters is the getter. So, sorry, deprecated, right? So you could Java lang deprecate it, but it's better to use the one from Spring Boot, because you get to add a little bit of extra information there, like a reason, say, bad name. Okay, you can make a more lengthy explanation, but I don't have time for that. So, and the other thing that you can put is a replacement. And basically I can say this thing is now called chatter ping.interval. And I save that, and what happens now is the behind the scenes Spring Boot has regenerated the metadata that describes these properties. Our editor automatically picks that up, and you can see here that it says, this is deprecated, please use chatter ping interval instead. And we also have a little quick fix for that. So if I press here, you can just change that like that. Okay. That's where I wanted to stop and hand things over to Martin.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kris. I will continue right exactly what Kris finished, but just a second. Don't kick off my projector cable. Otherwise, no one will see anything anymore. Yeah. Will do. Will do in a second. Okay, let's switch. Now yeah, here I am. Great. So what I'm going to show you here is additional features for the Boot dashboard that we implemented to make your life easier, especially when you work with Cloud Foundry. So what I have here is the dashboard, and I added a Cloud Foundry target to it, so I can use my Cloud Foundry stuff in the same way as I use my local apps in my workspace. I don't know if you have seen that before. That's kind of an old feature, and we added I think some good stuff to it. The first thing is I can edit a bunch of them in the Boot dashboard. I can now connect to them and disconnect, so they are not connected at startup anymore. So if you were maybe annoyed using the old version and have 20 targets and it's connecting everything at startup all the time and trying to connect everything, that's no longer the case. You can quickly disconnect and connect to it, and it keeps the state, shows stuff up. So that's great. And I have a bunch of stuff in my workspace actually. A lot of old demo apps. So I would like to filter them. But there's a service on Cloud Foundry that I would like to use, the Rabbit service. So what we added is you can put tags on those services too. So when I do the filtering now, the service still shows up, so I can get a nice overview about what I have. Magically, I have the same apps that Kris implemented a moment ago, so that's great. I can work on them, and I would like to deploy them to Cloud Foundry. And what I would like to do is I would like to start with the command bot thing, and it has manifest files, Cloud Foundry manifest files inside that you can usually use to deploy apps to Cloud Foundry. Right? You put the Cloud Foundry specific configuration into a manifest file, and we implemented nice editors for that. And I have, in this case, one for prod, so one for kind of a production environment maybe, and one for my usual environment and my test environment. So that's nice. You can open up an editor. And I don't know if you have worked with manifest files before. I did. And I can't remember what I have to put in there. And I have to look up the Cloud Foundry documentation and things like that. But that's no longer the case because our editor knows content assist, knows what belongs to a Cloud Foundry manifest file. So that's great. I can see what properties are in there for a Cloud Foundry manifest file. And not only that, I can also see documentation about what is this property about. So what I would like to do is I would like to specify the memory settings for this application. What should I do? Okay, put some memory in there, get some content assist saying, oh yeah, let's get a gig, even a build pack. Let's specify a build pack, Java build pack, and I'm done. So that's great. Gives you a lot of help for quickly editing manifest files for Cloud Foundry applications. So this saves a lot of time for me not looking up the doc anymore, so I can quickly do that. So when I go ahead and deploy my app to Cloud Foundry now using the boot dashboard, just drag and drop, it asks me which manifest file to use actually. What configuration should I use? Because I have multiple ones, and maybe I would like to use a totally different one. So I get a nice dialog where I can select the right manifest file, get a nice preview. In this case, it shows me, oh, okay, this is the preview of the thing. I could even edit it here, which I will not do now. Go ahead with this one. So that deploys the app to Cloud Foundry. Done, right? It's not really done because we have to wait for Cloud Foundry to get everything uploaded and created the container and starting the app and things like that. But I can also see the log output here nicely from the application. So that's great. That's not the only thing I would like to deploy. I would also like to deploy the banner service, which is not yet on my Cloud Foundry instance. And the banner service does not have any manifest file in there. So I haven't specified any configuration. So what the nice deployment dialog does for me is it allows me to pick a different file from somewhere in my workspace, or it allows me to just type in my configuration that I would like to use when deploy this app. So in this case, it thought I might use these configurations, these options. And I can go ahead and just type in the stuff that I would like to use. In this case, the memory setting, that's okay. I don't need a build pack, don't need a domain here. And I get all the nice features that I am familiar with editing manifest files right in here too, which I think is great because, for example, when I type in ABCDEFG, I get an error and tells me, no, that's not a good memory thing. If I get content assist, I get content assist. If I try content assist, get content assist, and so on. So I think that's great. Okay, so let's deploy that too. So both apps are being deployed to Cloud Foundry at the moment. Let's see how far they are. Oh, it's still downloading stuff. So that's good. Okay, so let's wait for them a moment. While they're being deployed to Cloud Foundry, the command bot is already there, so that's good. Let's open up the application and see what's going on there. So I can just double click the old feature of the dashboard. You can just double click and you jump to the default URL of the app. That works for local apps, but it also works for apps on Cloud Foundry, so I quickly can see what's going on Cloud Foundry. I see the ping is going on, and let me go back here and see what's going on there. Let's succeed deploying that one. That's okay. Some more stuff is going on here. Some other stuff is going on here. Okay. And I think I forgot something, because I think when I was editing the manifest file, I think I forgot to put in put in the service, because I would like to bind this to a service on Cloud Foundry, which I would like to do now using the web console. So I can quickly jump to that. Say, open up the web console of my Cloud Foundry instance, log in. Let's do that. It's a cheddar command bot. Yeah, that's, I think, the right one. And I go ahead and I bind a service, my Rabbit service. Let's bind that service. Okay, I'm done. That's good. We can quickly restart the app here on my dashboard. Assuming maybe I've changed some stuff locally too, or some stuff changed. And in this case, it would be quite dangerous if the boot dashboard would just deploy the app as it is again and restart it again on Cloud Foundry, because it would use the manifest file that I have used again, and all of the stuff would be lost that I changed on the Cloud Foundry side. But luckily, the dashboard is smart enough to check that for you. So whenever you went ahead and changed something on Cloud Foundry and you redeploy the app or restart the app, it checks for changes, for differences, and you get a nice diff view here saying, hey, on Cloud Foundry, there's a service being bound in between. Locally, you still have your manifest file not containing anything. What would you like to do? I will not go ahead and just silently overwrite everything that you changed. It tells you. And I can say, okay, forget about the manifest file and don't associate that anymore with it. Or use the manifest file as it is, because the stuff that I changed on Cloud Foundry was crap. Or I can just go ahead and say, hey, merge the changes on Cloud Foundry to my manifest file and continue to use the manifest file, which I think is great. It's the easy way to keep both sides in sync and that you do not lose anything by accident, which I think is great. And it doesn't only work for services. Whatever you change on the Cloud Foundry side is being reflected back to the manifest file in your local workspace if you want to. So that's great. It's going to be restarted. Okay, so that's cool. But by looking at this application, it's too slow, right? It's boring. Prints out something every 2 seconds or whatever. So it's SpringOne, right? We are more dynamic. We do more stuff in less time. We deploy more stuff in less time. So let's change something. Luckily, this ping bot has DevTools on it. The same stuff that Kris showed for local apps. And we can do the same for apps on Cloud Foundry, which is great. So I just need to connect a local client to this application running on Cloud Foundry with DevTools, so that it connects to that. So in this case, now that I kind of connected my DevTools to the application on Cloud Foundry, I can go ahead and change my app locally, and all the changes that I do to my project locally in my workspace are automatically being reflected on Cloud Foundry, and the app is being restarted. So what I would like to do is now, I go to the Pingbot app. Where is it? It's here. Pingbot app. There's my configuration, and let's change this to a shorter time. Okay, so I save that. I go back to the thing. It's being uploaded. It's kind of the DevTools restart stuff under the hood, and boom, there it is, right? It's changed the app on Cloud Foundry. So that makes your app development while pushing apps at the same time to Cloud Foundry, working with apps on Cloud Foundry from your IDE a lot easier, right? You do not have to re-push, restart everything over the wire over and over again. You can just quickly make changes. But take care, right? This is not for production usage. Yeah? And you know all the changes that you make silently under the hood on your container will be wiped out by Cloud Foundry from time to time, and kind of if it figures out, oh, you changed something under the hood, these kind of snowflakes is not allowed, and so it will restart the container for you. But while doing these kind of development tasks, that's really nice and really handy. Really cool. And it's directly supported from STS. So that's nice. Okay, let me stop that again. From time to time, you don't really know where the problem is. So you first have to find out what is the problem. So let's try to see if my banner service is working now. Oh, wow, yeah, it's printing out SpringOne platform 2016. That's great. But maybe something is not working inside of this service. So what should I do now? Maybe it's only not working when I'm on Cloud Foundry. Maybe it's a problem in general in the service. But maybe I don't want to kick off everything locally as Kris did. I would like to reuse the application that is already running, all the stuff that I'm running on my cloud, because that's what my cloud is for, right? I can put everything on there, all my 20, 100, 1,000, come back to the question second, 1,000 microservices. They're all running on Cloud Foundry, but I would like to take a look at one specific part that might contain a bug. In this case, maybe it's my banner service. So what I can do now, and I could also do it in the previous version, but I'm so excited about that I have to show you that again, is you can start up the banner service locally and expose that to Cloud Foundry, to the service registry on Cloud Foundry. So I start the banner service locally, and I select the service registry on Cloud Foundry that this service should register itself to, and it will do that. So it will, I forget about the breakpoint. It will start up the service locally on my machine, right? Step one. Step two, it will open up a tunnel to the outside world so that someone from outside can use the service that is running on my local machine. And as a third step, it will register my locally running service with the remote Eureka on Cloud Foundry. As a result, whenever this service on Cloud Foundry is being called by all the other components on Cloud Foundry, my whole system that's running there, it's being routed to my local service on my machine, so I can debug that. So I can go ahead to my banner service and say, hey, let's put a breakpoint in here. Oh, there is a breakpoint, so that's great. So let's try. Let's try and see what happens when I kick off the banner again. Wow. It goes to my local machine, and I can debug the service locally on my machine, even though the rest of my system is fully running on Cloud Foundry. So I don't have to start everything locally and do everything locally on my machine and then kick off a Rabbit and kick off all the other microservices that are running, maybe from my teammates, maybe from other teams, and so on. I can just debug stuff locally on my machine, which I think is great. So when I would hit continue, it would continue with the flow and all the rest in Cloud Foundry. All the other services would just continue to work, right? Which I think is a great step forward when you work in this microservice cloud-native world where your app do not longer consist out of one big thing that you can start up locally. It contains out of maybe hundreds or thousands of microservices running on Cloud Foundry. So that's, I think, a very nice feature in the Boot dashboard to allow you to do more stuff. Okay. That was kind of a quick demo of some nice new things that we put in, and some ideas and some features that we put in to make your life, basically your life easier, right? We would like to make your life easier. Whenever you have something in your mind where you think, hey, this annoys me, would be great if you could help me with X, Y, Z, let us know. We are very open to that. And we would really love to hear from you. What is missing maybe, or hey, this stuff from the Boot dashboard, that's really annoying because I have to do these 10 clicks. It doesn't work all the time. Let us know. Okay, what you've seen. Wizards for quickly getting started with Spring Boot, easily managing dependencies, adding additional Spring Boot dependencies, additional Spring Boot starters is very easy with the edit starters thing. We put in a lot of new code templates, tiny little code templates that make your typing life easier and quicker. We showed you the advanced support for editing property files and YAML files, config files for Spring Boot, and I think that's really awesome. I really love that. And I can very easily just type something in, and with these smart content assist search thing, magically shows up the right property files and shows me some documentation. I think it's really cool. The boot dashboard kind of establishes itself nowadays. There's some kind of a microservice development center. You can easily start and stop your boot apps there, dealing with many boot apps, filter apps. That's cool. I showed you the Cloud Foundry integration, some debugging for that, and some ideas and some features to really shorten the turnaround cycles when dealing with apps on Cloud Foundry, and many small tips and tricks along the way. But what we are up to, the next release cycles. We showed you STS, Spring Tool Suite, and we released 3.8.1 just yesterday, so really hot off the press. The next maintenance releases will ship kind of in sync with the next Eclipse releases, so we are always trying to adopt the latest Eclipse releases. Eclipse Neon came out in June, so we adopted that. Neon.1, .2, and .3. Take care, 3 maintenance releases now from Eclipse Neon this time. We will adopt them and ship versions kind of 1 or 2 weeks after that. And this stream will focus on fixing bugs, improving maybe performance, improving stability, adding tiny little things here and there, and adopting those releases. The big thing afterwards, the stuff that we start to work on now, is STS4, which will be the major release that's kind of maybe previewed next year. So come back to SpringOne platform next year. So make sure you register for the conference to get a hot preview of STS4, which will be a major review, major rework of the tooling, and will change dramatically under the hood, adopting completely new architecture that makes it a lot more performant, more stable, and it really adopts the latest architectures that are kind of make sense if you develop IDEs nowadays. The old tooling is still based on how Eclipse was built 10 years ago, and with STS4 we are kind of really moving into the future of building IDEs and giving you the latest stuff on the best architecture that is available nowadays for building developer tooling. Okay, with that, I would like to thank you all for attending. Of course, we are open for questions. We still have a little bit of time because we got these extra 10 minutes, and now it's just extra 6 minutes. Some references, if you want to ask questions when you're headed off home after the conference, feel free to ask questions in Stack Overflow. We monitor that. File issues. Download SDS, of course, if you haven't done already. And I'm happy to answer a few questions right now. Otherwise, don't miss those other talks about productivity. So if you're interested in IntelliJ, there's one on IntelliJ tips and tricks, one on Spring Boot productivity. Hope you enjoyed the conference, and I'd like to thank you all. Thanks for coming.